I wrote it probably as much for any reason as a result of Ronald Coase, who has been saying to me, he published an article that I wrote in the Journal of Law and Economics at the University of Chicago in 1973. It was about the birth of the plywood futures, and very arcane at that time. Remember, picture the world, no financial futures. Merck has pork bellies, is pretty much trying to break out of that. You know, at the time I wrote it, 40% of the trade was in soybeans and their products, and and there were no other foreign exchanges. He and I became friends as a result of it, or professional colleagues, and he said to me, look, the economics profession assumes that markets exist. If you've taken a freshman economics course, it shows you a supply curve and a demand curve and says, assume there's a market. And he said, look, you built them, okay? And it takes 10 years, and it's a very, bad assumption that the economics profession makes. It's very easy to assume there's a market, but that's to assume away the problem of how do you actually develop a new financial product? How do you develop a sustainable stock index, which I developed? How do you develop a interest rate product? How do you develop a carbon product? How do you develop a catastrophe swap? How do you hedge hurricanes? You need to tell the story and what are the benefits of it. And it turns out that the transparency, we did some back of the number things. There's enormous economic value, and I go into that in the book, just kind of backhand. So I did it because my mentor wanted me to do it. My wife also said to me, why don't you do it? The time was right. I sold the exchange and said I'll sit down and write up stories. So it's a bit of it's a funny thing. It's not a memoir. Not a memoir. It's not a finance and economics text. It's a narrative with economics in between. So it's a tough book, and I'm sure a lot of people, may find it difficulty because I go into things like cheapest to deliver and how do you homogenize bonds and then how do you go and spread an idea of interest rate futures around the world, and how do you open new markets in China and India. What are the challenges that you face in countries where there's no clear property rights or laws? And so it's a balance of a story about things I got right, things I got wrong, and hopefully readable by policymakers who are in China and India and Vietnam and Indonesia and South Korea. And how do you really start a market? How do you invent something intangible like a financial instrument? And what are the successes you've had and why? And what are the failures you've had and why? And try to create a very, very disciplined story about those successes and failures. Well, every time I kept reading the paper, it was derivatives, and the implication was evil. Black, derivatives. And I had used the word derivatives in 74, okay? And I used them in the way that we use calculus. If you've taken calculus, you take a derivative of an equation. It is related to the original function. It's a mathematical calculation, just like the futures. And it referred only to exchange-listed products. That's all it was. It was interest rate futures. Those were, what were they? They were derivatives. They were derived from the Ginnie Maes and bonds. And gradually that expansion, the definition was expanded to anything that wasn't the underlying product, whether it was listed or unlisted. And I wanted to be clear to the world that there were these things called derivatives. And if you're going to call everything, then I'm going to call the other ones good derivatives, okay? Because they haven't been, the Chicago model has worked. This is the story, and this book is about LaSalle Street and not Wall Street. And I wanted to really leave the reader with the impression that there were good derivatives, ones that work perfectly well and seamlessly, like relating to the environment, the interest rate risk management, and we need to be clear about terminology. And there's a lot of sloppy journalism out there, a lot of sloppy academic work, and we cannot use a catch-all and say that something done in an opaque space with no centrally cleared item is the same as bean futures or bond futures.